Welcome to The Explainer. We take fascinating, complex stories and turn them into clear, dynamic presentations. And today, we've got a really good one. Okay, let's just dive right into this historical mystery. It is a wild story about lost books, ideas so dangerous they had to be kept secret, and a legacy that somehow, against all odds, managed to survive by hiding in plain sight for centuries. So our story kicks off way back in the 10th century, right at the peak of Muslim Spain. And it centers on this really enigmatic figure, Muhammad ibn Masarra, though you'll often hear him called Ibn Masarra. Now, this is what makes Ibn Masarra a kind of philosophical ghost. He lived as a hermit up in the mountains outside of the bustling city of Córdoba, teaching his ideas to a small private circle. And here's the kicker. His original books were all destroyed, so pretty much everything we know about him comes from the people who hated him, or from the faint echoes of his ideas we can find in later thinkers. He's this puzzle we have to piece together from the shadows.
Okay, so you might be asking, why all the secrecy? Why did he have to hide his teachings away? Well, to get that, you really have to understand the world he was living in.
So, on the one hand, Córdoba was this shining beacon of civilization, incredible science, art, culture. But on the other hand, the official religious atmosphere was incredibly strict. The dominant school of thought saw any kind of independent philosophy, any reasoning outside of scripture, as a dangerous heresy that needed to be stamped out. And this phrase, this says it all, doesn't it? This was the official mindset. It was a kind of brutal agnosticism. Basically, if a question couldn't be answered directly from the holy texts, the only acceptable answer was, I don't know. Any kind of speculation was completely off limits. This created this huge, really dangerous divide. On one side, you had the state-approved orthodoxy, which would punish new ideas with prison or even crucifixion. And on the other side, you had this philosophical underground, thinkers like Ibn Masarra, who had to use secrecy, hidden meanings, and esoteric doctrines just to be able to think freely without being killed.
So what were these secret ideas? What was he teaching up in that mountain hermitage that was considered so incredibly dangerous? Okay, so his whole system, which was this really unique spin on Neoplatonism, started with one big radical idea he called first matter. Now, this isn't physical stuff like wood or rock. No, this was a single, universal, spiritual substance that God created first. And everything else, both spiritual and physical, would eventually come from this one source. He imagined all of reality flowing outward from God in these distinct steps, like a cosmic waterfall. So first you have the Creator. The Creator makes the first matter. From that spiritual substance, the universal intellect emerges. That intellect then gives rise to the universal soul, and then finally, at the very bottom, you get universal nature, which is the physical world we can actually touch and see. And driving this whole cosmic process were two fundamental forces. He called them love and discord. Love was the spiritual force, this drive towards unity that's always trying to pull everything back to God. And discord, well, that was the physical force, the drive towards separation that pulls things apart and gives them their individual physical bodies. So what does all this mean for us? Well, for Ibn Masarra, every human soul is like a tiny spark of that great universal soul, but it's temporarily trapped in the physical world of discord. So the whole point of life, the ultimate goal, was to purify your soul, to fight against the pull of the physical world, and climb back up that cosmic ladder to your true spiritual home. Now, after Ibn Masarra died, his secret teachings didn't just vanish. No, something much more dramatic happened. His school of thought actually fractured, and one group took his ideas in a shockingly radical direction. Right, so this is where the story gets really wild. This disciple, a guy named Ismail, steps up. But he wasn't interested in quiet, personal, spiritual growth. Oh no! He took Ibn Masarra's philosophy and twisted it into a blueprint for a complete and total social revolution. I mean, just look at how different their views were. Ibn Masarra taught his followers to be poor, to purify their souls. Ismail preached that owning anything more than what you needed for that one day was literally theft. The master taught chastity, the disciple pushed for free love. Ibn Masarra's spiritual afterlife gets turned into a flat-out denial of physical resurrection. And then the most dangerous idea of all, prophecy wasn't a divine gift anymore. It was a skill anyone could learn. That directly challenged the authority of the Prophet Muhammad himself. You can see why this caused a massive split.
So think about it. His books are burned. His school is torn apart by radicals. His name is associated with heresy. You'd think, okay, that's the end of the line, right? Game over for Ibn Masarra. But somehow, his central idea didn't just survive. It thrived.
How does that even happen? How does an idea from a secret, heretical school manage to jump across centuries, across languages, across religions, and embed itself in totally different cultures? Well, the way it happened is one of the most amazing hidden stories in the history of ideas.
Here's the crucial link. About a century after Ibn Masarra, this brilliant Jewish philosopher named Solomon ibn Gabirol, who was later known in Europe as Abba Sabran, he picked up that core concept of a universal spiritual first matter. And he didn't just mention it, he made it the absolute cornerstone of his own famous book, Fons Vitae, or The Fountain of Life.
Let's just trace this incredible journey. The idea starts in a hidden Muslim mystic school in Spain. It gets picked up by a Jewish philosopher writing in Arabic. Then his book gets translated into Latin and spreads like wildfire through Christian Europe. For centuries, Christian scholars are debating this idea, totally unaware of where it actually came from. And eventually, major thinkers like Scotus and the whole Franciscan School officially adopt it, making it a key part of Christian philosophy.
And that's the great irony, isn't it? An idea that was considered so dangerous and heretical in 10th century Córdoba gets, you could say, laundered through a Jewish text and becomes a foundational concept for medieval European thought. Ibn Masarra's name was completely forgotten, but his most important idea secretly lived on. The story of Ibn Masarra just makes you wonder. It forces you to ask, how many of the core ideas that we think of as ours actually have these secret histories, these hidden lines connecting us back to people and places and cultures that we've totally forgotten about? What other philosophical ghosts are just waiting to be rediscovered in the archives of our past?